Limit to conclude here today. So is everybody ready to get started? Curtis, you good? Rena, you good? Assuming
I'm ready.
so. All right. Good morning, CORFAC Nation. Welcome to the closing session of CORFAC International's 2020 Fall Summit. I'm Phil Crane. I'm a principal at Providence Commercial Real Estate, CORFAC International in San Antonio, Texas. As chairman of CORFAC's Professional Development Committee, it is my pleasure to introduce this morning's keynote speaker, Curtis Spencer, president of IMS Worldwide. Before we begin Curtis's presentation, I want to thank our session sponsor, the Analyst Pro. Rena, would you like to say a few words?
Thank you. Good morning. My name is Rena Hawkins. I'm the customer care manager for the Analyst Pro. First, thank you for inviting us to the CORFAC virtual conference. And briefly, I'll just tell you a little bit about the Analyst Pro and overview our benefits. The Analyst Pro is a CRE Tech #1 investment modeling software, including investment and lease analysis, location risk, demographics, infographics, offering memorandums, flyers, and brochures. You can analyze any property in just minutes, and from all of our devices, you can create a professionally designed marketing flyer for all of your sale and lease properties. With our Commercial Package Pro tool, you can create the most comprehensive offering memorandums in the commercial real estate industry. Create a full OM in just 10 minutes, and the Analyst Pro will automatically generate a dedicated property website. We host the website, so all you have to do is click the link and send it to your clients. And within seconds, you can generate a flood report, crime analysis, and environmental risk analysis for any property in the U.S. I'm happy to personally provide you with a demonstration for your office or one-on-one. Just email me or contact me at rena@theanalystpro.com. Or you can also connect with us at support@theanalystpro.com. Thank you again for having us as your sponsor, and we look forward to working with you.
Thank you, Rena. We really do appreciate y'all's support. So now, without further ado, I'd like to welcome Curtis Spencer, president of IMS Worldwide, headquartered in Houston, Texas. IMS Worldwide is a leading consulting firm for developers and real estate trusts as it relates to value propositions for industrial real estate, port efficiencies, and site selection differentiators. Mr. Spencer is a featured speaker at more than 55 national conferences and workshops each year, and has been published in industry media outlets such as the Journal of Commerce, Pacific Shipper, Inbound Logistics, and other news magazines. He is probably not getting to travel as much to these places, and maybe even enjoying the virtual world. We'll see. So please remember to remain muted during the session. Use the Zoom chat to ask if you have any questions. And now, please welcome Curtis Spencer. Thank you.
Yes, sir. If all the good loaded equipment works, then yes, I'm ready to go.
Very good. Well, Curtis, I've introduced you. I don't know if you heard it, but it was a glowing report. And so I am turning it back over to you to allow you to continue.
My face is flush. Thank you so much. And sorry about the glitch. Welcome, everybody. And I love having this type of process where we actually get to meet online, and I know we're going to work on questions as we go, so everybody who has a question, please make sure you add it, and let's get started. All right, wait, go back to that great slide. This is our life. I don't know if you can see the guy in the forklift. He also has a mask on. Everybody's got masks on. We're gonna just change to a whole country that looks like bandits, and it's crazy to see that. So I'm glad that when we're virtual on this call, that we don't have to have masks on. So that's helping quite a bit. So anyway, please proceed. I'm gonna give a little bit of background on who we are. Our company's been around, I hate to say this, 45 years this year for me. My dad started the company 10 years before. We work with a lot of the Fortune 1000 companies and the largest REITs and development investment groups in the country, and have since about the year 2000. That's when we really started getting into industrial real estate. Next slide kind of shows you a little bit about our reach where we are located in terms of projects. And as you can see, most of those are at gateway markets, markets where most of the inbound and outbound flow of goods are brought in. Let's go to the next one. Okay, we're going to talk about the economy, retail and e-commerce, logistics and transportation trends and how they affect industrial real estate, and what we're calling is the next normal, and a final piece on foreign trade zones, because that's where our company started, quite frankly, and we've seen a huge, huge amount of growth in the FTZ world ever since this current administration started imposing all the additional duties. I'll just say a quick note on that. The average duty collection in the US for the last 30 years has been about $20 million. Excuse me, 20 billion is what customs collected. And as you guys know, $20 billion to our federal budget is a rounding error. Well, since the new administration came in and created this viewpoint that China, you can't cheat us anymore, and we're going to have to figure out a way to substantiate that and put you back in line, our annual collections are now $120 billion, which means that we all had an increase in the cost, or someone sucked up that 25% extra cost. And I'll talk about that when we get to the final session. So what's the economy doing? Unemployment is down to 8.4% after reaching almost 15% in early April. Excuse me. We had a GDP decline that almost crippled the country. And I remember sitting here in this very room trying to imagine, how we could sustain 30% reduction in GDP. But as you notice, we came right back up. I mean, we were all hoping for the V, and I think we kind of got the V. It's flattening out a little bit, and there's still COVID concerns. I get the Wall Street update every day, and we had another 30, 40,000 cases and another 1,000 deaths yesterday. So we're not out of the woods yet, but I think we're getting a better handle on this. CBRE's experts looked at annual GDP falling about 5%, but growing about 6% next year. And I think that's going to be pretty close to on point. It's amazing how we keep going through, hit the next slide, going through the updates with our economy. And I don't think this is any surprise to anybody. Leisure, hospitality, travel, all those really got hit. When you get down to transportation, warehousing, and wholesale trade, I mean, these numbers, quite frankly, are old. These numbers came out in, I think this was May, a statistic, but all the transportation and warehousing, wholesale trade, trucking has come right back up to where we were. In fact, truckers are now in short supply again. Let's go to the next slide. The issue of reshoring, which was the ultimate goal that the Trump administration went after when we added all these extra tariffs, but it's actually working. I mean, it's a very slow, I'm in trade. I deal with this every single day. And I will tell you that what happens when you place these tariffs on, people make supply chain decisions based on cost. It's all about cost. They made supply chain decisions about going through the West Coast or going to the East Coast. And that changes around an entire set of transactions. Well, once you start adding the extra tariffs, you start resetting your pro forma for the supply chain cost and the cost of goods sold. And you start thinking, maybe it's not so expensive to operate in the North American content. Now, I always say North America because I think the biggest beneficiary of reshoring is going to end up being Mexico, and now with USMCA. And, for my friends in South Texas, this is an excellent scenario for us. All right, let's go to the next slide. This supply chain resilience is a huge piece, and I'm going to talk about it a little bit more in the coming slides, but we're looking at supply chain resilience as that 5%, what they call safety stock. If you've got 5% safety stock, that would lead to an additional 1 billion square feet of industrial space. Now, I want you guys to think about this. Who needs safety stock? Well, obviously, PPE, pharma, food supplies, toilet paper, and paper towels. We all need extra volume of goods to meet just-in-time requirements. I don't know about you guys, but who's a Prime member that ordered something on Amazon in April and you didn't get it in 2 days? You didn't get it in 4 days. You were lucky to get it in a week. Well, this safety stock, which is basically what supply chain resilience is all about, is absolutely critical and will end up becoming something that is way more important as we move through getting out of 2021. We're going to start seeing that people are making those decisions. And one of the big reasons why we went to just-in-time and zero inventory that Dell Computers started back in the early 2000s is because interest rates were high. What are our interest rates now? 1%, 2%, less than 1% Fed funds rate, giving you about a 4 or 5% prime. It's not an issue of, oh my God, this is going to cost me too much in carrying costs. I've got to have inventory because stockouts has become now the big problem in retail. All right, let's go to the next slide, please. So cargo volumes are rebounding, and this is a real phenomenon. I could not believe this when I read in the Journal of Commerce over the last 5 or 6 weeks, the cost now of getting a container from Asia to the US is $4,300. It's always been $1,800 plus or minus $300-400, except when we had the big strike, except when we had these other crazy exterior events. But now we're starting to see that those cargo volumes pushed way up, and what that did is it raised the price of the cost of those containers because a lot of the ocean carriers took those out. So here's some stats for you that I won't go through every one of these, but you can see that it's both West Coast and East Coast ports that are showing a huge increase. Now, you know how statistics work, guys. This is an increase over a 30% drop in, March, April, and May. So these numbers don't show at the end of the day, we're still volumes down from 2019, but we're starting to see a surge. Hit me that next slide, and I think I've got this on a graph. All right, there you go. So this is total monthly TEU volume of container imports from Asia, year-over-year change. And, August of 20, that number's way up there to 1.8 million TEUs. This trend is a makeup from the 1, 2, 3, 4 months previous, where you see it was dropped 20% down. It was a terrible drop. So we're starting to see this come back. Please go to the next slide for me, and let's switch to e-commerce and cold chain. By the way, I put these together because we're seeing a huge phenomenon in cold chain. Our company's been on the podiums for the last 2 or 3 years talking about this. That's the next coming wave. And sure enough, it is. It's absolutely growing out the wazoo. But what's happened with the rest of retail? We've got huge levels of bankruptcies with brick and mortar. And this is just a few, but some of the bigger ones. I get a sourcing journal newsletter each day about the retail sector, what's going on in both the sourcing and the retail companies. And it's amazing to see how many have filed for bankruptcy. And quite frankly, this is not Chapter 7 bankruptcy. This is Chapter 11. They're looking to reorganize to get out of it, but we're seeing a massive shift when we get to e-com facilities, which are basically industrial boxes selling retail, compared to retail facilities, which are retail boxes selling retail. That's what's happening. And it's even happening all the way down into automobiles. There's a resurgence now in automobiles. And that last little bullet, but SUVs remain a bright spot. Why are SUVs selling better than the smaller automobiles? They're selling better because gas is cheap. I filled up yesterday, $1.75. Thank God I live in Texas. Next slide. Overall, e-commerce sales increased 18%, not 12 to 14 like we had been doing before. They're now almost 15% of all U.S. retail sales. That jump is from 10.5 to 11% last year. Amazon had a 40% increase this year. That's why they're building, what is the 100 new distribution sort centers over the United States. This is insane. And Walmart has finally captured the number 2 spot. It's very interesting. Walmart is started at a much lower pace than Amazon, but they are coming on very strong. So is Target. So is Home Depot, Best Buy. A lot of different firms have started to really figure out how to manage this e-commerce process and make it work. And we're seeing these job increases in that sector that are amazing. I mean, they're phenomenal. And there are a lot of those that Amazon's hiring over 30,000 people working from home, providing analytics. This is a really good thing in a COVID kind of world. So press on to the next one, please. Look at this. This red line to me is absolutely amazing. We had regular 10, 11% growth, started out a little bit smaller, and now look what happened between 19 and 20. That line shot up. That's a 40% increase, guys, in 1 year's growth rate to the next year's growth rate, and it's expected to go even higher in the following year. When we get to that percentage of retail, e-com's not going away. Who can remember 2008? Somebody said, hey, I want to build a $100 a square foot Amazon building. Where am I going to get the funding for it? And what did the investment groups tell you? Well, we'll never be able to repurpose that building. What the hell are we going to do with a mezzanine? Well, I think that we've come full circle with that. And now we're going to even get more different types. The whole e-commerce group within industrial is going to split within 4 or 5 different product types for industrial. There'll be the big box. There'll be the regional. There'll be the sort center. There'll be the last mile. And then there's going to be the returns. These 5 different food groups within e-commerce are going to drive a huge increase just the end of this year all the way through to 2025. You're going to still see that kind of increase. All right, let's go to the next slide. Obviously, you see Amazon there, and now look, Walmart is number 2. Walmart jumped over Home Depot, Apple, eBay to get to the number 2 spot in literally 18 months. 18 months, I have this slide from 18 months ago. Walmart's way down there where Home Depot is. Wayfair is coming on strong. My wife loves Wayfair. And I got to tell you, I kind of do too. I don't necessarily like to buy furniture every year, but she is a decorator, and so we buy furniture every year. What I love about it is it's free shipping. Pretty amazing business plan for those guys. Costco's getting in the mix. Macy is still holding on. I love that. Macy has a huge network of both apparel and footwear e-commerce facilities that are quite astounding. All right, let's move on. Look at this number for cold chain. Almost $100 billion market. Compounded annual growth rate of 12%. Oh my God, this is going to go track back to that graphic that you saw for e-com. And why is that? Because more and more, especially kicked off with COVID, more and more of us want our food delivered. I went to my local H-E-B this last weekend, and I almost got run over 5 times. Not by the lady with their kid in the cart, but by the young men and women who had the multiple height carts for e-com delivery, either pickup or delivery from my local HEB. Almost got run over 5 times. I mean, these guys are whipping around, filling those orders, and they're being delivered to your house. It is amazing to see, this growth. And as we continue in this process, the HEB general manager is going to go, I can't keep pulling all these people into my store to do this. I'm going to have separate regional e-com delivery facilities that are ambient, cold, and freezer, all connected. That's what you're going to see, this growth rate. You're going to see third-party logistics providers that are doing cold and cool and ambient storage for the Targets and the Walmarts and the Costcos as they continue to build out the supply chain. We may see a whole complete new asset class forming. And this is not $100 a foot. This is $150 to $200 a foot facilities. Next slide, please. Let's talk about transportation and logistics. Oh, did you skip one? Where are we? Yeah, cold storage. Okay, here we go. So the disruption of the coronavirus has definitely caused this surge. I think temperature controlled. I've got 2 projects right now I'm working on, actually 3, one in Houston, one in Dallas, and one in Phoenix for spec development of cold storage facilities. Spec. Someone's going to spec a $200 a foot facility of 300,000 to 400,000 square feet. There's a whole set of companies that are doing this now. But as you see down at the bottom, 75 million to 100 million square feet will be needed to meet the demand in just 5 years. This is a huge phenomenon. This is as large as the demand cycle that we saw for plastic resin manufacturing and plastic resin packaging that required 40 to 50 million square feet over the next 5 years. And we're in the middle of that cycle too. This is double that. All right, next slide, please. Now we're going to talk about transportation and logistics. So here is what we're working on relative to ocean cargo. West Coast 25% higher than it was in May. And this is a surge that I was telling you about earlier that grew that cost of a container all the way to $4,000. The LA Long Beach is not all of it though. We've also got East Coast ports that are surging and growing as well. And a continual mini shift each year. So it's not dramatic, but it's a mini shift from West Coast to East Coast as the size of ships gets larger and the capacity for logistics operators to figure out, if I send it East Coast, I got to add in 3 more weeks. However, I get it there all water and I don't have to pay the rail rates. So there is that whole phenomenon going on, but it is it's a phenomenal thing to see as these supply chains get more and more robust, more and more visible. You're going to start seeing a move to a balance between East Coast and West Coast that we haven't seen before. All right, next slide, please. Look at this. Contract loads up 27% year over year. We need 10,000 more jobs in the trucking industry. And this is not something that is dialed back. This is 4 months gains in trucking employment. So I had dinner last night with an old friend who said he's in the heavy haul trucking business. I didn't know he had moved to that from where he used to be. And the kid said, I'm working 18 hours a day. Well, now he's working 18 hours. He's not driving 18 hours because there's hours of service requirements, but he's having to plan, book, and not be in his truck, but for 11 hours. But my God, he's busier than ever. And that's the heavy truck haul. That's not anything having to do with containers or intermodal or long haul trucking. This is just the heavy haul. So I think we're going to see this move forward as a real demand driver. You'll see more domestic intermodal will happen as I take those 53-foot trailers, put them on rail, and move them along, which, by the way, answers a big question. You know, why aren't we going to have the driverless trucks? Well, the railroads will tell you we got driverless trucks now, and they're called railroads. So we have a lot of options as consumers and as retail logisticians in how we get goods from A to B. All right, next. Speaking of intermodal, here's that slide showing how intermodal has come back from a huge drop that they had in March, all the way back to where we were back in September, October of last year. In fact, a little bit higher. So very interesting statistic there. The railroads were screaming and hollering about how bad it was, laying off people in March. And now they put a $500 to $1,000 surcharge on every box coming out of the West Coast, going to Chicago or Dallas, if you're not one of the major customers. All right, next. Air cargo, this is amazing. So most people will be thinking, well, we don't have any airplanes flying, so why is air cargo going up? Because there's so much less supply of airplanes. Now the rates jumped up 6 times to $12 a kilo from $2.50 just months ago. We basically, with COVID, took out 50% or more of the belly cargo capacity. So now the Asian carriers are literally ripping the seats out, you know, of Air India and Singapore Air and China Air, and putting cargo into those passenger rates to be able to handle this. Take the next slide for me, please. This is a great picture. This is Columbus Rickenbacker Airport. Now, I want you guys to think Columbus Rickenbacker Airport serves a huge volume of retailers in that market and e-commerce providers. Our firm helped that airport grow from 2 flights a day to 2 flights a week to 25 flights a week pre-pandemic. Then pandemic hit. We expected, we're going to get a lot of calls from Rickenbacker to try to help them balance that and get that more. Not at all. Those planes didn't bring in Victoria's Secret garments anymore. They were bringing in PPE, and that's what you see in this picture. This picture was shot in April of this year. And this was there was a line of 747s that were on the tarmac that day bringing in PPE. So next slide, please. Let's look at industrial real estate, guys. Do we have any questions that need to get answered? I've been running too fast, Phil.
Curtis, I sent a note to everybody, none so far.
None so far. Well, that's good. Okay, so I'll keep on going. Amazon's reported to open 100 operations facilities by September. That's now. I think they're up to 80. I think they slipped on a couple. But you have to understand that what an e-commerce facility is above and beyond anything else. It's a shift out of brick and mortar retail to a facility that we all call industrial. It's almost square footage the same. It's interesting. I'd like to see a graphic put together by CORFAC that would show the volume of Simon Properties and all the mall retail space that's dropped in the last 5 years and the volume of e-commerce space, and to see what that correlation would be. I bet it would be very interesting to see that. Each $1 billion in new e-commerce spending drives a demand for 1.25 million square feet of industrial product. I think that's a little high, just as my personal opinion, guys. And the reason I say that is because this statistic was created by CBRE about 2.5, maybe 3 years ago. And in that time, the efficiency First of all, if you built an Amazon building 3 years ago and you built one today, the big box, they're completely different design, completely different equipment inside, because they've grown, and they do this about every 3 years. They completely throw out the old design and come out with the new version of their big box, and they're way more efficient. So I'm thinking that the square footage number may be closer to 750 or 800,000 for each $1 billion in new spend, but that's a technicality. Let's go to the next slide.
Hey, Curtis, it's Jonathan. We did have one question just come in.
Sure.
It was from David, and he said, when the safety inventory is met across the U.S., will there be a greater shift of ocean freight from West to East Coast?
That's an interesting question. And I have to dissect it like this. So that safety stock of things like pharma, PPE, food products, etc., will go to the first port it can get to. So if it's coming from Asia, it will dump right directly into West Coast. And we saw this in May, June, July. West Coast grew at much faster rate than East Coast because it takes a whole nother month to get to the East Coast. So when you wanted to fill in that safety stock, you filled it in by going as fast as you could to the West Coast. That's number one. Number two, product that normally can go longer, and they call this discretionary freight. That product is already planned on having a 2 or 3 month longer cycle. So it will probably have some increase if it's a South American or European origin versus a Asian origin. I hope that answers the question, but it's much more complicated than it sounds. All right, so there's an interesting phenomenon here on your vacancy rate. It's starting to come up a little bit, but quite frankly, the amount of new supply has gone down almost as much as that vacancy rate has crept up in the 2020 timeframe. I'm a firm believer that we're going to see more development in 21 than what this shows. And I think that vacancy rate will flatten out. This is I think this is Cushman's viewpoint of the world. And I think NAIOP had a large report that came out that showed there was going to be some absorption reduction in the last half of 20 into the first half of 21. And I completely don't believe it. And the reason I say that is because I, like you guys, we're in the marketplace. Are you seeing deal flow slow down? I'm not. Industrial deal flow? I'm not seeing any slowdown at all. Okay, next slide. All right, so this is the hottest types of facilities we're seeing. Cold storage, infill last mile, and multi-story warehouses. I want to talk about multi-story. I think that we're going to see more development of multi-story, but in more specifically key markets. You're going to see them in very dense markets. I don't think we're going to see multi-story catch fire in all the major top 10 markets. I don't see it. There's just too much land there. Every time I keep hearing about inland empires out of land, I run across somebody at Prologis or Duke or Panattoni, finding another 250 acres that they've got entitled. Well, until we run out of that, we're not going to get to multi-story, except in the boroughs, except in San Francisco or downtown LA or downtown Seattle, which we have some, but they haven't quite had as good of fill as we thought. Infill last mile facilities that are converted facilities are much more the norm right now. And in fact, I even read an article about a mall that got converted to some last mile. Definitely more cold storage. New supply of industrial demand, I think it's really going to grow. 2018 a record year. This is from Cushman. I'm not seeing that slowdown in the second half of 2018. 2020 like everybody else is. I mean, I work in a lot of these LA, Phoenix, Dallas, Houston, Miami. I'm seeing people go out even further into the hinterlands, your tertiary, secondary markets, and finding space that, you know, is being used by people you would never expect to use it. And it's happening. All right, next slide, please. Okay, so what's the next normal? We got 2 years before we return to air passenger volumes. 2 years. E-commerce and safety stock will keep this going. And this is my mantra I've said over and over again. Just in time only works inside of North America. And COVID absolutely positively proved that point. If no other reason than you guys out there in the field seeing the COVID impact on secondary and primary markets demanding more excess space. I mean, it was amazing. We had 60,000 and 50,000 and 40,000 square feet of space being purchased on short-term, or at least on short-term basis by companies that would never normally get inside that kind of space. Why? They had to fill it up with toilet paper and pharmaceuticals. The office impact is going to definitely be affected by a new work at home normal. I don't know where office is. I'm not in that space, but I have to tell you that we've become, this session right here proves it. We've become a nation that can actually function remotely. And I think there's a lot of need for collaboration that you don't quite get on Microsoft, or Zoom, but we're going to have to face the fact that that may be a little bit more permanent. On globalism versus nationalism, no matter who wins in November, we are not going to put the foot off the neck of China. We're not. We might take the foot off the neck of our allies a little bit more, which I think has been a little bit too strenuous. But I got to tell you, we've got a lot more nationalism, which means reshoring. We got social distancing becomes contract tracing. I don't know anything about this, but boy, is this something that could be a privacy issue. And then again, great places, great opportunities is Columbus area, Phoenix Metro for manufacturing, and West Coast. It's been a phenomenal growth in those two not normally top 10 markets. All right, next slide. I think we're getting into foreign trade zones. I'm going to run through this relatively quickly. Okay, so there's a multitude of companies that are using this, and you've heard of all of these. It has to be enough of a savings that people say, hey, this is something that makes sense for me. There's a thing called MPF savings. That's a customs fee that was charged per unit. When the fee went up to $500 per bill of lading, all of a sudden, I don't export, I don't manufacture, all I do is import and distribute. Those companies became users of foreign trade zones. But look at all these new names down here. Sub-Zero, Maxwell Technologies, that's basically Tesla, Red Bull, White Claw, all these companies are using the FTZ to lower costs. All right, next slide, please. What happens in a foreign trade zone is they just take out cost. $300,000 to $1 million out of cost is a typical savings analysis for a company in 500,000 square feet. The whole operational headache has become easier, software simpler, customs is actually making it easier for people to operate in zones. There's a weekly entry process, but with the new China tariffs, it's also a super high tariff rate driver of how FTZs have become critical for companies who previously had no use for it. Let's go to the next slide. What Trump did with China was he said, I'm going to slap this duty level on the first half of the imports. China did the same to us. And now we added another $250 billion. And this hit hard: apparel, footwear, electronics, furniture, sound systems, cosmetics, tools, and handbags. Now, that is a lot of the consumer products that we all take and use. It's amazing. I think Apple was very smart in getting the lobbying to keep cell phones out of it. So Samsung, Apple, Google phones, those were all spared from this extra thing. But as we go through the rest of the cycle, we're gonna see that may come back onto the table. All right, next slide, please. So how do we insure against it? By carrying an FTZ insurance policy. We've literally gotten double the calls for FTZ since the whole tariff sheriff business started. That's what I call them, tariff sheriff. Even small occupiers are feeling the pain. I've got a couple of customers that are only in 100,000 square feet, and they're in auto parts. And their auto parts had come from Asia, and they went from 2.5% to 22.5% duty rate. I mean, that's going to chunk your margin. So these guys are using FTZ, and they finally have gotten some relief. Next slide, please. So I wrote this particular slide for all my broker buddies in real estate, because this is not your strong suit to talk about tariffs and everything else like that. So the main thing that you got to look at is my customer in 300,000 square feet or more of distribution space or fulfillment space? Or if I know that they have 100 million in import value or more than 1,000 customs entries, that's 1,000 truckloads. So if you know that they plan to have more than 1,000 inbound trucks, then this company can take advantage of the FTZ. So these are good markers for you to look at that. And what's the next slide? So bingo, you qualify. We have a cost benefit analysis program that we give out to especially our real estate friends for absolutely no cost. And what this is we take in about 6 or 7 data points, put them in the system, and it comes out for the customer, tells them exactly what they can save or not save in a foreign trade zone. If we save them $2 to every $1 of cost, I'm telling you, that's a foreign trade zone customer. And what does it do for brokers? It makes them the smartest guys in the room. That's why 62, I think, at last count, 62% of all my leads come in through real estate brokers. So let me show you a specific example of this. So this is a small importer in Texas. This is the front page. This shows you the raw material or raw data points that we have. Half of these we've created ourselves because we know what that number is going to be. But the other half, those data points come in from the customer. How many inventory turns do you have? What's the duty rate? How much exports do you have, et cetera, et cetera. Now turn to the next page, and this is what we provide them, is a 5-year P&L look, a P&L, profit and loss look at what they're going to save in an FTZ. And then I circled the big punchline. This is the dollar per square foot impact of an FTZ on your customer. So you're trying to get them to do this building over here that's in a zone versus that building over there that your competitor wants them to move into. And now you can show them a $2.58 difference on their operating cost as it relates to square footage costs. Beautiful. I can sell my grandmother for less than this. So the point is, you've got a real tool here, and that includes the cost, by the way. The costs are in there. This is net benefit to your customer that had that size of facility, 350,000 square feet, that has that kind of import volume, 70 million. That's really a very, very conservative case. and they're going to save this much if they're a small importer in Texas. So the reason I bring all this up is that this tool is available to you guys. It's a tool that's much more needed today than it was 4 years ago. And especially in this pandemic, margins have gotten cut to crap. Margins are getting really raked over the coals, especially when the total volume of throughput has gotten lowered because of COVID. So now I'm scrambling to get more margin. I mean, that's why these ocean carriers aren't bringing on more supply. Hell, they're only doing, 75% of the volume that they were doing last year, but they're charging $4,000 per container, not $1,800. They're not hurting because of that. So it's all about margin, and this gives you much more creative use of margin. Next slide, please.
Hey, Curtis, there's a question.
Oh, good.
Josh, who says, who sets up the FTZ areas?
Okay, so a company like ours will set up the FTZ at wherever your customer is located. Now that we have all 50 states have foreign trade zones, and there's 300 different grantees. A grantee is a public-private venture, or a city or a state or a port authority or an airport authority. Those are the entities that the federal government grants the authority to set up in their region. Example, Atlanta has a foreign trade zone that spans like 60 counties. And it is a huge foreign trade zone operated by a public-private partnership off of Atlanta Airport. So all these grantees now cover the entire United States. So you can set up a foreign trade zone wherever you want. Did that answer your question there? Are we there? I'm not hearing you, Jonathan.
He said it did answer his question.
Oh, okay, good.
I have a question from Jason, who says, who is buying grandmas?
I wish I had my grandma to sell, but don't have her. I know how you brokers are. 10 cents a foot a month, man, that'll change the world. But hey, I want to say thank you to CORFAC. I really appreciated being on here. And again, if you've got my information there, you've got our website there. So anybody needs to find out more information or run a free cost benefit analysis, just go on the website. You can do it.
Thank you, Curtis. I guess there's no other questions, Jonathan?
Doesn't look like it. And everybody, we will be sending something out early next week with links to all the presentations that you've seen over the last couple of weeks, including Curtis's, with the slide deck, etc. So that'll all be available soon. Phil, I don't know if you got anything else.
I have nothing else. Just thank you to Curtis today, and also to Analyst Pro. And, thank you to the staff for setting up our virtual conference this year. You guys did a great job.
Great job.
Appreciate all of the efforts, under the current circumstances. And hopefully, I think everybody would look forward to being able to get together again, as soon as that's practical.
Yes, sir.
All right, guys. Well, then I guess we will call ourselves adjourned. And thanks again to everybody. And we hope to see y'all soon. Bye.
Bye-bye.